Seated. All right, good morning, everyone. We are on the record on CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. We're continuing with the defense case in chief. The court would note the jurors are all returned and present, properly seated. Jurors have each signed their juror affirmation that they followed the court's admonishing instruction yesterday as you left. So thank you again for continuing to follow that as you have throughout this trial. The witness is on the stand, Mr. Murray, who's previously been placed under oath. We were continuing with direct examination when we broke for the day yesterday, or I think, did we complete direct examination?
Yes, Judge.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you for the reminder then. Direct had concluded, so we'll start on cross-examination at this time. And is that going to be you, Mr. Wixom?
It will, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Wixom, then if you'd like to commence with your cross, you may do so.
Thank you. Now, before I begin, may I ask to be provided with the state's previously admitted exhibit 77G as in George?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Judge, again, what exhibit did he reference?
77G.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I begin while the clerk's looking for that?
Yes, if you'd like, you may.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Ms. Murray.
Morning.
So I want to start this morning by revisiting the questions you were asked by the defense counsel yesterday. Do you remember when you first took the stand, he had asked you to explain to the jury how many times that you had met with him?
Yes.
And do you remember what your answer was to that?
Once 2 days ago and one other time on the phone.
Okay. Now, you wouldn't disagree, would you, that the loss of Tammy Daybell would be and was a traumatic experience for your wife and for her siblings?
Absolutely. All right. I absolutely would agree that that would be the case.
Likewise, would you agree that the finding of Tylee and JJ's bodies on Chad's property was likewise a traumatic experience?
Yes, for the whole family, indeed.
So it would be safe to say then that over the course of the last 5 years, you have probably had many conversations with your spouse about the surrounding facts, haven't you?
Yes.
And likewise, is it also safe to say that you've had many conversations with her siblings about these same situations?
I wouldn't say many, but because we didn't live in the same household and we weren't gathering weekly even. So I wouldn't say many.
But you did have conversations over the course of the last 5 years with the siblings.
Yes.
Okay. You said that you didn't live in the same house with them? Is that what you said?
With the exception of one brother, one of Emma's brothers. Yeah.
Okay. And we'll come back to that. With respect to the events of October 9th, you were asked some questions about the layout of your house relative to Chad Daybell's, and you explained that your house is kitty corner.
Correct.
Okay. And you'd also referenced in your testimony that you've testified previously about these things in a grand jury proceeding.
Correct.
And that would have been roughly May of 2021.
Correct.
And Mr. Pryor had asked you some questions relative to your testimony in that proceeding. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Okay. And those questions in part were directed towards your information about this October 9th attempted shooting of Tammy.
Correct.
Now, I just want to be clear. In your grand jury testimony, and I believe yesterday you confirmed that you did not see the attempted shooting.
That is correct.
And In fact, you weren't even aware of the shooting until after you received a 911 notification.
Notification on Facebook.
I'm sorry. That's what I meant to say.
Yep.
Okay. And it was after that notification that you asked your wife about it. She hadn't seen it, correct?
She had just seen it as I was going into the house at
And
about
the-
the same time, roughly.
Thank you. And then either one of you reached out to Tammy and called her.
Yes, she did.
And so you at some point talked to Tammy, or did you at least overhear the conversation she was having with your spouse?
Yes.
Which was it?
I didn't directly talk to her. I overheard the conversation.
Okay. Now, just for clarification, your testimony today, yesterday, and at the grand jury is that you don't have any personal knowledge with respect to however that shooting occurred or whatever went down. Fair?
That is correct.
Now, when you finished talking to Tammy or your wife did, you decided to make a 911 call?
My wife was still on the phone with Tammy when I made the call.
And you did that, I presume, because you were alarmed with the situation.
Yes.
And at that point, to your knowledge, had Chad ever made a phone call?
Not that I am aware of.
And frankly, at that point, Tammy had not called 911 either, had she?
No.
Judge, objection. There's no foundation to establish that he would have any knowledge of that.
Overruled, not timely.
You were also asked questions by Mr. Pryor yesterday about having talked to Deputy Cannon
Correct.
back on October 9th when this attempted shooting happened.
Correct.
You had explained that you went into the roadway and met him and gave him some details.
Correct.
And in fact, I think you denied yesterday that you had ever told Deputy Cannon that you had heard Tammy scream.
That is correct.
Likewise, I think you denied that you went over to the house immediately after the scream and didn't see anything suspicious. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So then it's your testimony that Deputy Cannon, if he put that in his report, has it wrong. Is that fair?
That is absolutely fair.
So he has inaccurate information.
That is true.
And I think you tried to explain that away somewhat yesterday by the fact that
Judge, I'm going to object to the characterization, explaining away.
Sustained.
you don't disagree that yesterday on this point, you had explained that when you had met with Deputy Cannon in the roadway, you were quick to give him information because you wanted him to go search.
Correct.
So isn't it possible that whatever you were relaying to Deputy Cannon in that quick interaction, one reason for the discrepancy could be he misunderstood what you were saying?
Possible, but very unlikely.
So you believe he was intentionally inaccurate?
Correct.
Okay. With respect to what you said yesterday about Tammy never having described this paintball gun as anything but a paintball gun, you did testify to that, yes?
Yep.
Isn't it possible that you simply could have been mistaken about Tammy's full description of what happened as you were overhearing and listening to a conversation that she was having with your wife?
Due to the fact that it was on speakerphone, I don't think so.
Well, you said a second ago that it still could have been possible that given the nature of the situation, Deputy Cannon could have been confused by your explanation to him, correct? You just said that.
Yes, but I was also very clear in what I explained to him.
But you don't believe that you're beyond having that same kind of miscommunication if that did occur?
No, based off of the fact that both my wife and I had the same understanding from the
Well,
same
I'm not asking
conversation.
about your wife's understanding. I'm asking you, yes or no. You certainly could have had the same kind of misunderstanding,
I don't believe so.
but you could have, or you simply,
Judge asked and answered.
Sustained.
after you gave that information, whatever information you gave to Deputy Cannon, did you have any further conversations with him about this?
No,
In fact, you went back afterwards and talked to your wife and talked to your mother-in-law some more about this incident?
I when are you referring to?
Anytime at all?
Maybe the next day or after that. I don't recall having a specific conversation about it after.
Now, yesterday, I'm going to move on to October 18th. You had testified, and I think you'd confirmed through your defense counsel that on the 18th of October of 2019, that you had been helping a friend do some work. Is that correct?
Correct.
And in fact, it was because of that work that you felt a need to borrow your mother-in-law's truck. Is that correct?
My in-laws truck, yes.
Well, in fact, going back to the grand jury testimony back in May of 2021, when you were asked about this, do you disagree that in the transcript, you specifically described it as your mother-in-law's truck?
I may have, but it was owned by
Just
both
yes
of
or
them.
no is all I asked for. So I think you also explained yesterday that on that day when you needed the truck, you went to her to get the keys at work, correct?
Correct.
And so you had indicated that she had the truck at work, correct?
Correct.
So on that day, she'd driven the truck.
Yes.
And that was October 18th.
Yep.
That would have been just under 10 days from the shooting incident, correct?
Yeah.
And in fact, when you returned the keys, you returned those same keys back to Tammy, correct?
Correct.
Now, you also testified yesterday that at some point Chad Daybell gave you that very truck.
Yep.
Do you still have that truck?
Yes.
You still drive it?
Not right now because it has some mechanical issues.
Okay. But you were given the truck back in December of 2019?
Yep.
Right. Did you drive it for some time after it was given to you?
Yes.
Now, you likewise have explained that you have been married to Emma for 7 years, I think.
Almost 7 years.
So roughly 5 years ago, you would have been married to her a couple of years.
Correct.
At that point in time, you had one child.
Correct.
At that point in time, you lived across the street, kitty corner.
Correct.
And then, isn't it true that on June 9th of 2019, of 2020, when Chad was arrested, you and Emma moved into Chad's home?
Correct. Well, not on after. Are you saying after June 9th? Sorry.
Sir.
Okay. Yes. Not on June 9th, but after. Yes.
Yes. Okay. You know, if I might have permission to publish State 77G at this time on the Elmo.
You may.
So going back to receiving that truck, you were given that truck by Chad. Yesterday you testified in 2018, but I think you later clarified that was 2019. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And that was December of 2019?
Correct.
Did you explain the occasion as to why Chad gave you the truck in December of 2019?
No.
Why did he give you the truck in 2019?
Because we only had one working vehicle at the time.
And so on June 9th of 2020, it was after that, shortly after that, that you moved into Chad's home.
Correct.
That's when he got arrested, correct?
Correct.
And that's the day they found Tylee and JJ on that property, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Now, I want to call your attention to this exhibit, and I want to invite you to go down and look at the entry. Let's see. The fifth entry that's dated June 9th. Will you look at that, please?
Yep.
And what is that reflecting?
Deposit into my checking account.
For what amount?
$8,000.
And who made that deposit?
I am not exactly sure.
You're not aware if that would have came from Chad Daybell?
Well, I know we got $8,000, but I wasn't sure. It just said $8,000. So
you don't disagree that this was $8,000 that came from Chad Daybell?
No.
Okay. No, you don't disagree?
No, I don't disagree.
Okay. And that occurred, I'm done, Your Honor. That occurred, again, the day he was arrested?
Yep.
So to be clear, Chad Daybell in December 2019 gave you his truck.
Yep.
Okay. And then later in June 9th, when he's arrested, he deposited $8,000 into your account.
Yep.
Correct. And then he had you guys move into his house, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And were you aware that he also gave Emma $9,000 in cash that day?
Yes.
So he gave you roughly $17,000 in cash,
Okay.
correct? Had given you one of his vehicles, correct?
Yep.
And gave you a place to live, correct?
Yep.
You were asked questions, and we've already alluded to this, that at some point you had found out that JJ and Tylee had been buried in Chad's backyard.
Correct.
Right. Right. You had described, in fact, that you believe JJ had been buried by the pond and Tylee by the fire pit, correct?
Yeah.
Now, have you ever met JJ and Tylee's mother?
Lori Valla?
Yes.
No. I mean, yes, sorry. I went back to the thing you were talking about, them in particular. Yes, I've met Lori.
Okay. And isn't it true that the first day you met Lori was the day after Tammy's funeral at Chad's house?
Yes.
So she came to Chad's house, and that's where the family met her.
Yes.
And that was it the immediate day after her funeral?
I don't recall the exact day. If it was the immediate day after, but it was shortly after. Yes.
Yeah, and you had testified to that effectively, that
Yep.
it was the day after. Have you ever heard the name Alex Cox?
Yes.
And who is Alex Cox?
Lori Valla's brother.
Had you ever met Alex Cox?
No.
Had you at any point in time ever seen Alex Cox on Chad's property?
No.
You were asked some questions yesterday about the layout of Chad's property. Do you recall specifically getting a question about the long driveway?
Yes.
And you were asked a question about whether or not someone could access the long driveway to a place behind the property where they then could not be seen from the roadway. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you acknowledge that there is a place back there where someone could access through the driveway, through a gate, and then not be visible from the roadway to the public while they're back there.
Yep.
So then you wouldn't disagree. And that area was in the general area that accessed both the pond and the fire pit, correct?
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. Counsel's testifying.
Sustained.
Didn't you testify yesterday that that access point was in the general area of the pond and the fire pit?
Yes.
So then you wouldn't disagree that whomever, whether it was Chad or somebody else,
Judge, objection calls for speculation.
On that second part of the question, I will sustain that.
you wouldn't disagree that anybody who buried those children could have used that driveway and have done so outside the visibility of the roadway, correct?
From the Salem Highway, no, they would not have been able to.
Now, you testified also that at some point in time, Detective Hermosillo had been seen driving by this property,
Yep, before and after Chad's arrest.
and that was something that you had observed personally?
Yep.
And at that point, had you met Detective Hermosillo?
Yes.
And that's how you were able to identify him?
Yep. And I've also seen him on Facebook.
Okay.
Um,
Did you see Detective Hermosillo the day that Tylee and JJ were found?
I can't recall for sure on that day.
You don't have any reason to disagree that Detective Hermosillo was one of the lead investigators in this case?
No, I have no reason to disagree on that.
No reason to disagree that, in fact, he was there the day that the bodies were found?
I would assume so.
So you wouldn't disagree that for law enforcement to drive back and forth by this property, that they may have suspected the bodies were, and in fact found the bodies there. That wouldn't necessarily be unusual, would it?
Perhaps no. However, this was even after the bodies were taken out, that he would slowly drive by the property.
And to that point, so you would disagree that a detective who discovers bodies on a property, arrests somebody from the property, might have a surveillance or investigative interest in continuing to drive by the property to identify if someone else was coming back to the property after the bodies had removed. You don't disagree with that, do you?
I don't see the reason for it.
You're not a law enforcement officer, are you?
Absolutely not. I would rather choose any other profession.
Okay.
Choose any other profession.
But you don't disagree that a law enforcement officer who found bodies on a property might want to continue to observe that property to see if anything else suspicious occurred there at the property.
I don't see the reason for him returning.
Do you think finding bodies on a property is a big
Judge,
deal?
I'm going to object. It's been asked and answered at least a couple of times.
Sustained.
When Detective Hermosillo was driving by the property, did he ever make contact with you?
No,
Were you aware that some kind of memorial had been placed on that property relative to Tylee and JJ?
yes, but the slow driving by wasn't just on 200 North. It was also on Salem Highway.
You don't disagree that for a law enforcement officer to find two children buried on a property would be a traumatic event, do you?
I don't disagree. However, I don't understand why during working hours we would need to return and visit the memorial.
So that's not understandable to you how a law enforcement officer might have a traumatic experience and go back and visit the property.
I didn't say that.
So then you agreed it could be.
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right. Redirect, Mr. Pryor.
And Judge, I'll need 77G.
Very well. I don't know if it's still up there. If it is, Mr. Wixom, just please leave it.
All right, did I return that exhibit back to Marshall? I can't remember. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge, may I publish 77G?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
I'd like you to count down the fourth entry on 77G.
Okay,
It says the name Seth C. Daybell. Do you see that?
I do.
Can you tell me who Seth C. Daybell is?
Seth is the son of Chad and Tammy Daybell, also my wife's brother.
And do you see how much money Seth got?
$8,000.
Okay. Are you aware of any of the other children of Chad Daybell getting money as well?
I believe all of them did.
Do you know what the amounts were?
$8,000.
Judge, I have nothing else. Thank you.
All right. That'll conclude the testimony then of Mr. Murray. Is he going to remain under your subpoena, Mr. Pryor?
He is not, Judge.
Has the state got him under subpoena? Okay, you are released then from any subpoena. Thank you for coming in and testifying, Mr. Murray. You can be excused.